Welcome to the season of Advent. Good news and bad news. The good news is that something is coming. There is a holy anticipation of what will be. It's the time period that one of our great theologians calls the great positive possibility. But it's bad news as well because it reminds us that we're waiting. And we're waiting. And we're waiting. And most of us aren't that good at waiting. We're ready for the carols and the eggnog and to scream out Merry Christmas. But we're not there yet. Think of this as being on an airplane, and when it lands, those last few minutes when you're waiting to get off the plane, no one is moving. All the baggage that fit in the overhead bins doesn't come out as easily. Everything is super slow, and you get antsy thinking you're going to be there forever. They're like the longest moments of my life because we're really not good at waiting. And actually, an airplane might not be a bad image for the season of Advent, for this time of life. Think of this as a long international flight. We have left the land where we once were, where we waited and longed and looked for the coming Messiah, and we're on our way to a new destination, a land that has the fullness of Jesus Christ and God's kingdom. The problem is that on this long flight from here to there, we don't have one of those handy television screens on the back of our neighbor's seat that tells us we have 5,757 more miles to fly, which amounts to 8 hours, 12 minutes, and 32 seconds. We don't have that. Instead, we have the knowledge that we're not where we're going yet, but we're getting closer and closer. We're not where we once were. We're not where we will be. We simply are where we are. We're in the now. In Dante's Divine Comedy, the 6th level of Inferno holds the heretics. In each of these levels, a specific group gets a specific punishment. The heretics' punishment is that they are fully aware of the past, and they know every detail of the future, and they lack all understanding of the present. Think about that torment. There might be no worse hell. All past, all future, no present, no now. Advent is now. Pastor Barbara Brown Taylor calls Advent the eternal now of God's coming among us. Author Nora Gallagher says that Advent is a time period where incarnation goes both ways. God not only enters into us, we enter into God, and neither of us will ever be the same again. So welcome to Advent. It's my favorite liturgical season, and I say that knowing that only clergy have favorite liturgical seasons. Abby rolls her eyes when I talk like this, but I love Advent. I love the candles. I love the themes of darkness and light. I love the history of it. I love the words that guide us these Sundays. Hope, love, joy, peace, and then Christ. It's such a great season. And then each year, in anticipation of this season, I open the lectionary and I'm quickly reminded that Advent begins with apocalyptic text the first week. And then the second week, it's John the Baptist. It's as though we got together to plan this huge celebration, a wedding, a big fancy wedding. And we were making the seating chart that crazy drunk political uncle and the crazy religious aunt that we always hide in the back. Instead, this season, we said, let's let them be the door greeters. You see, you walk into this season of Advent and you find the uncle who wants to talk to you about the end times. And he loves the late, great planet Earth. And he loves the Left Behind series, including the Kirk Cameron movies. And as soon as you can get out of that conversation, there's your super religious aunt who watches a lot of religious television. She sends money to the evangelist, and her favorite words are sin and repent. And welcome to Advent. It's a season of short days and long nights, which is exactly where Paul begins his text. It's the middle of the night. The blankets are perfectly snug around you. And the pillow is perfect because you just flipped it to the cold side. And everyone's tucked in safe and sound. And the dog is fast asleep at your feet. And you're just about to go to that deep place of sleep where you can freely dream. It's that comfortable place that we long for the minute we wake up. And Paul takes us to that place. And then Paul becomes a human alarm clock. Wake up. Christ is closer today than he was yesterday, and it's time for you to get out of bed. It's time to get moving. Salvation is nearer today than it was yesterday or the day before. The dawn will soon be here, and the dawn is the coming of Christ. So get out of bed, take off your pajamas, and put your clothes on, because we need to watch and we need to wait. In other words, be ready now. And Paul is saying what Jesus has already said. Jesus says it a little bit differently. Jesus tells us the story of a homeowner, a proud homeowner. It's a woman who's worked years to buy her first home for her and her children. It's their dream house. It's cozy. And it's in a great neighborhood, and it's close to great schools, and she's filled it with family antiques and furniture from Restoration Hardware and Anthropology. She loves this house. This is where she's going to raise her children, and this is where her grandchildren will come visit her. And she's fast asleep in bed one night when she hears that sound that everyone dreads hearing in the dark of night, glass shattering. And suddenly a thief is in her house. And she was not ready for that. Jesus tells the story, and then Jesus simply asks, if you knew such a one was coming, would you have gone to sleep? Jesus compares the present day to the days of Noah, where so many people were walking around with no idea of what was coming, and then God took the world by surprise. And then Jesus continues and he gives us these images of daily life. People working in the field, people preparing supper, when suddenly one of them is gone. Life has changed because one person vanishes into thin air. And what Jesus is saying is the same thing Paul is saying. Be ready now. And welcome to Advent. Advent, our Christian New Year, begins with a mystery. And maybe that's really fitting, so that we don't get too comfortable and we don't think we have it all figured out. Advent asks us to be ready, not to understand. Our Advent season begins with these words, be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour, because He's already done so once. So be ready now. This Advent is the season where we keep watch, and it's not about circling a date on the calendar or watching for the signs of the time or reading the newspaper thinking of Revelation. No, it's not about that. This is about hope, the hope of the coming Christ. And the hope begins now, as we keep our eyes open, as we watch. That's what we're on vigil for. And that hope begins now if we live into the hope of the day that is to come. And that can be really hard to do, especially when the world looks dark, when everything is spinning out of control, when you're tired and it's been a really long year, and when you're afraid. There are times when hope seems like an impossibility. It was in the mid-'80s when Dan Quisenberry was a pitcher for the Royals, and they were in a real slump. They had lost game after game after game, and they weren't pulling it together, and they had no signs of pulling it together. During a press conference, he offered the following words concerning the future of the Royals. I've seen the future, and it looks a lot like the present, only it's longer. I know that feeling. We all know that feeling because it's crept up in our lives from time to time. And sometimes it's just there for a few minutes or a few days. But other times it comes into our soul and it makes itself at home and it sticks around for a season or for a year. It's hopelessness, that things will never get any better. Life can feel like that. Church can feel like that. Politics can feel like that. Family can feel like that. Our walk with God can feel like that. Our souls can feel like that. And on those days, we hold on with everything we have to the truth that hopelessness is a lie. It's one of the greatest sports moments. It was the 1988 Dodgers-Oakland A's series, and it was Game 1. The batter's name is Kirk Gibson. He hadn't played at all during the game. He was pinch hitting for the Dodgers. He wasn't supposed to play during the game because the previous game he had hurt both of his legs, and he'd spent much of the game in the locker room because he had a stomach bug. In fact, a lot of the game he's not even in the dugout with his team. But then in the bottom of the ninth, the Dodgers have someone on first and 2 outs. The coach took a chance and put Gibson at bat. Gibson hits a home run, winning the game. Many believe this home run is the momentum shift the Dodgers needed to win the series that everyone thought the A's would win. It's become a fairly well-known YouTube clip because of the historical moment, but also because of what happens in the parking lot during the game. If you pay close attention to the clip, the minute the announcer says home run, across the outfield you see red lights go on everywhere. You know what those red lights belong to, don't you? Dodgers fans who left the game early because they thought the game was over and that the A's had won. That they leave the game early, but then they do what all of us do when we leave the game early to fight the traffic. You turn the game on the radio. And of course, they miss what will amount to being one of the greatest plays in baseball history, all because they thought they knew what was going to happen. And they left the game too early. They were in the parking lot, and they were hopeless. So, in these days of Advent, we hold on to this. Hopelessness is a lie. And we know that because here's what we know. We know that hope and love and joy, peace and Christ, they bat last. And our hope is in that promise. So may we be a people that live into that hope, because the world needs our hope. As our beloved Susie Painter reminded us 2 weeks ago when we were in the midst of being expelled from the Texas Baptist, she sent me an email. Griff, First Austin is born into this time. We are born into this time, and God is asking something big of us. I believe that with all of my heart. So may we wake up, and may we keep watch. May we be on vigil, and may we live into our hope. And may we see stars lighting up the darkness, because light is coming. And here's the truth. It's nearer now than it was just a few seconds ago. Amen and amen.